three alien sisters are forced to marry a human man as punishment for mocking him. The twin sons of Veylara Prime were sinking low when the human first stumbled onto the dueling grounds. He was late, breathless, armor half-fastened, as though he had run across 3 provinces and only remembered halfway that he was supposed to look dignified. His boots clanged against the crystalline floor, their sound so out of place that many in the court already began to chuckle. The alien crowd, tall and luminous, their long ears twitching in disapproval, shifted restlessly at the sight of him. He looked less like a warrior and more like a tourist who had accidentally wandered into a sacred ceremony. The 3 sisters stood together on the balcony above, cloaked in regal fabrics that caught the light of the suns and shimmered like living starlight. They were proud, severe, and endlessly amused by what they saw. Their whispers carried on the wind, sharp enough to cut. "That's the challenger," said the eldest, her voice dripping with scorn. "He's smaller than my training drone." The second sister smirked, flicking one long ear back like a weapon. "He's probably hiding extra weapons under those ridiculous straps. Look at him. He can't even find the buckle." The youngest covered her mouth, trying but failing to suppress laughter. "Maybe he'll duel himself before it begins." The human, oblivious to the words but not to the tone, raised a hand in greeting. The gesture looked almost cheerful, as though he'd walked into a tavern rather than an arena of life and death. The crowd murmured. The champion of House Veylara, a hulking figure armored in alloys that shimmered with protective fields, stepped forward to face him. The contrast was absurd. One looked like a walking fortress, the other like a man who had borrowed his equipment from a museum and wasn't entirely sure how to wear it. When the duel began, everyone expected a massacre. The champion lunged, his blade trailing arcs of plasma, enough to melt steel. The human ducked, stumbled, nearly lost his footing, and somehow the strike missed him by inches. The crowd gasped. He looked surprised too, glancing at the ground as if to thank it for moving just in time. Another strike came, faster, angrier. Again, the human dodged, not gracefully, not with skill, but with a clumsy luck that was so outrageous it began to look deliberate. The sisters leaned forward, laughter bubbling between them. "He dances like a broken loader," muttered the second. The youngest added, "Maybe that's a strategy. Confuse the enemy with incompetence." But then the duel shifted. The human stopped stumbling and began to move with a rhythm that was strange but effective. His sword, a plain human-forged blade, flicked out not with power but with timing, slipping past the champion's defenses when the great armored figure overcommit. Sparks flew. The crowd grew silent. And then, in the final moment, when the champion lunged in a sure-killing blow, the human sidestepped, tripped over his own boot, and fell in exactly the right way to drive his blade under the champion's guard. The alien warrior froze, plasma sword trembling, before collapsing in defeat. Silence ruled the arena. No one breathed. The sisters stared, mouths open, ears stiff with shock. The human, sprawled on the floor, blinked up at the sky. Then he raised his hand, still clutching his sword, and muttered, "I meant to do that." Laughter erupted, not just from the crowd, but even from a few dignitaries who tried to hide it behind their robes. It was a dangerous kind of laughter, one that mocked not the human but the humiliation of House Veylara. The 3 sisters' cheeks burned. They had mocked this man, called him weak, unworthy, pathetic. And now the law, ancient and unyielding, would punish them for it. The arbiter stepped forward, robes trailing like storm clouds. His voice boomed across the crystalline floor. "By sacred decree, mockery of a proven warrior is punished with binding. You laughed at him. Therefore you are bound to him. You shall be joined in marriage." The words fell like thunder. The crowd roared in disbelief. The sisters whirled on each other, ears quivering with fury. "What did you say about him?" hissed the eldest. "You started it," accused the second. "I only laughed a little," wailed the youngest, eyes wide in panic. The human, still lying on the floor, propped himself up on an elbow. "I'm sorry, what now?" The arbiter's voice was merciless. "You are husband to the daughters of House Veylara." He blinked, looked at the 3 furious women glaring down at him like gods deciding whether to smite a mortal, and muttered the only thing that came to mind. "Well, dinner at my place, then." The crowd's laughter turned into a riot. The sisters wanted the ground to swallow them whole. But law was law, and the duel had sealed their fate. That night, when the stars of Veylara Prime burned cold and bright, the three sisters sat in silence inside the great hall of their house. The human sat across from them, gnawing thoughtfully on a strange glowing fruit, as though this were all perfectly ordinary. "So," he said, chewing slowly, "do we take turns, or is there some kind of schedule?" Three pairs of long ears twitched in unison, bristling with outrage. The youngest hurled a cup at him. The second called him an insolent beast. The eldest declared that this was an insult worse than death. He caught the cup, set it neatly on the table, and smiled. "Great. Glad we're starting off on the right foot." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke a starship engine. But somewhere, faintly, perhaps against their will, the corners of the youngest sister's mouth betrayed a twitch of a smile. The hall of House Veylara echoed with strained silence the next morning, broken only by the sound of the human clattering about, as though he were in his own kitchen. He had risen early, before the suns had crested the glass spires of the city, and somehow gained entry into the noble family's kitchens. Now smoke billowed down the corridors, servants whispered in panic, and the sisters stormed into the chamber expecting sabotage. Instead, they found him humming to himself, flipping a slab of alien meat on a pan that was clearly not designed for such crude treatment. The eldest sister glared, her long ears twitching like antennae tuned to fury. "What are you doing?" she demanded. He turned with a grin, flour smudged across his cheek. "Breakfast. Or brunch. Depends on your planetary calendar." He gestured toward a platter piled with something. The youngest sister leaned close, sniffed, and recoiled. "It's moving." The second muttered, "It smells like engine lubricant." He cheerfully shoved a plate toward them. "Where I'm from, sharing a meal is the first step to not killing each other. Try it." The eldest raised a hand to refuse, but the human had already taken a bite himself. He chewed thoughtfully, then went very still. "Okay," he said, swallowing hard. "So maybe the green glowing part wasn't food." He coughed once, eyes watering, then forced a grin. "Still edible. Adds character." The youngest burst into laughter despite herself, a sharp sound quickly smothered under the eldest's glare. Word spread quickly through the household. The human was not sulking, nor begging, nor swaggering. He was simply present, clumsy and impossible to ignore. When the sisters attempted to retreat into their chambers, they found him already there, fixing a cracked hollow emitter with wires pulled from his own belt. When they tried to spar in private, he appeared at the edge of the ring, clapping politely, asking if he could take notes. The eldest called him a pest. The second called him an infection. The youngest called him a fool, but with less venom each time. That evening, as custom demanded, the four were seated together at the great circular table of House Veylara. The sisters dressed in their finest silks, ears crowned with jeweled chains, their posture rigid and flawless. The human wore the same battered armor he had dueled in, now polished to a lopsided shine. He sat too casually, legs spread, one hand drumming on the table as though awaiting tavern music. The room was filled with nobles, all watching, waiting for sparks to fly. The arbiter who had sealed their union raised his voice. "Tonight, we witnessed the first meal of their binding." Plates of shimmering delicacies were brought forth, each one crafted to dazzle. Meats that glowed faintly with bioluminescence, crystalline fruits that pulsed with inner light, liquors that shimmered like molten stars. The sisters took their portions with grace, the very picture of nobility. The human, however, eyed the spread suspiciously. "None of this explodes, right?" The youngest choked back laughter. The second hissed, "Behave." The eldest pinched the bridge of her nose, as if praying for strength. But when he finally took a bite, his face lit up. "Oh, that's good. It tastes like chicken, if chicken had studied nuclear physics." A ripple of amusement went through the hall. Some nobles smirked. Others frowned, ears twitching in outrage. The sisters shifted uncomfortably, caught between shame and something far more dangerous, reluctant amusement. Later that night, when the court had dispersed, the sisters cornered him in the garden of living glass that stretched above the city. Stars shimmered overhead, captured and refracted by the crystalline leaves. The eldest confronted him first. "You make us look foolish," she hissed. "Every word you speak is a joke." He shrugged, leaning against a glowing tree. "Better a joke than a corpse. You've got plenty of warriors. I figure you could use a fool." The second stepped closer, her voice sharp. "You think this is a game? You think binding yourself to us earns you safety?" He tilted his head. "Not safety. Company." His smile was small, but it carried a weight they hadn't expected. "I didn't choose this either. But if we're stuck together, I'd rather laugh than glare until our ears fall off." The youngest, who had been silent until now, spoke softly. "You fought clumsily, yet you won." He met her gaze, surprised. "Luck," he admitted, "and maybe a little stubbornness. Humans are good at that. Stubbornness, bad decisions, surviving things we shouldn't." She tilted her head, studying him as though he were a puzzle with missing pieces. The eldest snapped her fingers, breaking the moment. "Do not be fooled, little one. He is nothing but noise." She turned on her heel, sweeping away, ears quivering with restrained anger. The second followed, throwing him a glare that promised 100 more arguments. The youngest lingered a heartbeat longer, then too vanished into the crystalline shadows. Left alone in the alien garden, the human let out a long sigh. "Well," he muttered, "that went somewhere." He sat on the bench of polished stone, leaned back, and looked up at the double moons. Married less than 2 days, and already were fighting about the furniture. A servant passing by gave him a strange look. The human raised his hands defensively. "What? That's marriage on my planet." He chuckled to himself, a sound swallowed by the vast alien night. But above, among the spires, 3 pairs of long ears twitched restlessly. The sisters lay awake, each in her chamber, replaying his words against their will. For all his clumsiness, his ridiculous jokes, his absurd courage, he was not breaking, and that, more than anything, unsettled them. The human awoke to the sound of metal clanging and voices raised in argument. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and realized it wasn't an alarm. It was the sisters, again, locked in one of their endless debates. He followed the noise down the corridor until he reached the sparring chamber. There they stood, swords crackling with energy, ears twitching furiously as they shouted over one another. The eldest's blade hummed as it sliced through the air. "He is a liability. A human in our house is shame enough, but now he parades through the halls as if he belongs here." The second parried sharply, sparks scattering. "Better a fool with stubbornness than an arrogant sister who cannot admit defeat." The youngest ducked behind the dueling ring's barrier, clutching her practice staff like a shield. "You're both impossible. He's not even here." At that moment, the human cleared his throat. "Actually, I am." 3 heads snapped toward him. The eldest's glare could have frozen a sun. "You have no place here." He raised both hands. "Fair. But since I'm apparently your husband, I figured I should know when my wives are planning to murder each other." The second snorted despite herself, lowering her blade. The youngest giggled before quickly covering her mouth. The eldest rolled her eyes skyward as though begging the ancestors for patience. Instead of leaving, he stepped into the dueling circle. "Look," he said, "if you're going to fight about me, at least let me participate. Otherwise, it's like arguing over a pet rock." The second's ears twitched dangerously. "You compare yourself to a rock." He shrugged. "Rocks are dependable. Good listeners. Plus, you can throw them at enemies." The sisters exchanged glances. Against all reason, the eldest sheathed her blade and handed him a training weapon, far too heavy for his size, glowing faintly with alien circuitry. "Very well. Prove you are not just noise." What followed was chaos disguised as combat. The sisters moved with lethal precision, weaving strikes in patterns inherited from centuries of warriors. The human stumbled, swung too wide, tripped over his own boots, and somehow managed to dodge blows by sheer accident. Once, he sneezed at exactly the right moment, causing a strike to whistle past his head. Once, he dropped his sword and bent to pick it up, just as a blade sliced the air where his neck had been. By the end, he was drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, and laughing. "See, Perfect strategy. Exhaust the enemy with incompetence. The youngest broke into laughter, so loud it echoed off the chamber walls. The second's mouth twitched, fighting a smile. The eldest's expression remained iron, but her ears flicked with the faintest hint of amusement. Later that day, the sisters accompanied him into the city for the first time since their binding. The streets of Veylara Prime were alive with alien technology. Levitating trams hummed overhead. Glass towers bent sunlight into rivers of color. Merchants hawked goods that pulsed with strange energy. Everywhere they went, eyes followed. Nobles whispered behind jeweled hands. Commoners pointed, and laughter rippled through the crowd. 3 noble sisters of House Veylara, walking beside a human, scandal-made flesh. The eldest strode ahead, head high, daring anyone to challenge her. The second flanked the human protectively, ears angled to catch every insult. The youngest darted from stall to stall, pretending to be uninterested in him, but always returning to his side. He, oblivious as ever, marveled at everything like a child at a carnival. Is that fruit levitating? Do you eat it while it floats, or do you wait for it to land? A merchant chuckled, offering him one. The fruit hovered, spinning lazily in the air. He reached out, missed, reached again, and missed again. By the time he finally caught it, the sisters were laughing openly. The laughter died when a rival house appeared at the corner of the market. Their warriors, clad in red alloys, blocked the street. Their leader smirked, bowing mockingly. So it is true. The daughters of Veylara are chained to a human. His words dripped with contempt. A fitting punishment. Shall we test his worthiness here and now? The eldest stiffened, hand on her weapon. The second bristled, ready to strike. The youngest clung to her staff, wide-eyed. The human stepped forward, holding the floating fruit like a weapon. You want to fight? He said. Fine. But fair warning, this thing's loaded with vitamins. The rival warriors blinked. For a moment, the absurdity derailed them. Then laughter rippled through the crowd. The sisters seized the distraction. In a blur of motion, their blades flashed, disarming the rivals, without a drop of blood. The human, still brandishing his fruit, declared, "And that's why you don't underestimate produce." The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. The rivals fled, humiliated. The sisters stood victorious, ears flicking proudly. And the human, absurd and grinning, had somehow shifted public opinion just a little. That night, back in the hall, the sisters sat together in silence. Finally, the youngest spoke. He is not what I expected. The second sighed. He is reckless, foolish, infuriating. The eldest closed her eyes. And yet he wins. From the corridor outside, his voice echoed cheerfully. Just so you know, I fixed the gravity regulator in your bathing chamber. You're welcome. Unless you like floating while you wash, in which case my bad. The sisters groaned in unison, yet none of them were smiling quite as little as they pretended. The human was in the workshop again, which by now had become a constant source of alarm for the household staff. Sparks flew from the corner as he crouched over a gutted drone, muttering to himself. Okay, wire red into something that isn't flammable, hopefully. The drone beeped mournfully. He frowned. That's encouraging. Or maybe a countdown. The sisters entered together, drawn by the sound of chaos. The eldest crossed her arms, ears angled like blades. You dare tamper with our machines? The second peered over his shoulder. That one hasn't functioned in years. The youngest knelt beside him, curiosity shining despite herself. What are you doing? He grinned, sweat on his brow. Fixing it, or breaking it further. 50-50 chance. He twisted a panel, and the drone suddenly lifted into the air, wobbling dangerously. See, alive. It spun, clipped a shelf, and rained tools onto the floor. The eldest barked. Turn it off. He tapped the side of the drone. It shot upward, smacked the ceiling, and crashed down in a heap of smoking parts. He coughed through the haze. Good news, I found the self-destruct feature. The youngest burst into laughter, falling back onto her heels. The second pinched the bridge of her nose, muttering. The eldest glared as though she might hurl him out the nearest airlock. But for the first time, she didn't follow through. She just said, You shame us daily. He dusted off his hands. And yet you're still here. Either I'm irresistible, or your house law is very strict. Later, during council, the tension in the city revealed itself. Rival clans were pressing harder, their whispers becoming open challenges. The council chambers shimmered with holographic stars, mapping threats along trade routes. Pirates prowled, enemies tested borders. One elder spoke sharply. House Veylara is weakened, bound to a human, mocked by neighbors. Soon your rivals will strike. The sisters bristled, but before they could speak, the human leaned forward. You're right. Every ear in the chamber twitched toward him. He continued. They think you're weakened, so let's make them keep thinking that. Then when they strike, you hit back harder. Classic human strategy. Let people underestimate you, then punch them in the teeth. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The eldest hissed, You do not speak here. But the elder tilted his head thoughtfully. There is wisdom in the fool. Murmurs rose. The sisters exchanged looks, each bristling, but unable to deny the effect he was having. He leaned back, whispering, See? Foolproof. Emphasis on fool. That night, the sisters confronted him in the hall. The eldest pressed a finger to his chest. Do not ever speak in council again. The second added, Your tongue will doom us. The youngest, however, tilted her head, but he was not wrong. Both older sisters turned on her, ears twitching violently. Do not defend him, they snapped together. The human raised his hands. Look, if it helps, I don't want to be here either. But if I can keep you alive, maybe that's worth being yelled at before bed. The words lingered longer than they should have. Days later, the first strike came. Rival ships breached orbit, unleashing raiding craft into the outer districts. The alarm bells of Veylara Prime screamed across the towers. The sisters donned their armor, blades humming with energy, ears angled like antennae ready for war. The human stumbled into the armory late, strapping on battered gear and muttering, Why do invasions never happen after breakfast? They descended together into the chaos of the city. Fires burned among the glass spires, drones battled in the skies. Civilians fled through levitating trams that had been sabotaged to spiral out of control. The human pointed at one skimming dangerously low. Okay, I'll handle public transit. You handle the guys with plasma rifles. Before they could stop him, he sprinted toward the tram, leapt, and clung to the side like a stubborn insect. Passengers screamed as sparks flew. He banged on a panel, shouting, Who designed this thing, and why did they hate safety? Somehow, against all probability, the tram steadied and drifted to a safe landing. Meanwhile, the sisters cut through raiders with terrifying precision, blades flashing like lightning under the twin suns. But even they couldn't help noticing him, battered and ridiculous, running headfirst into danger without hesitation. The eldest muttered under her breath as she cleaved through an enemy. The fool survives where warriors fall. The second snarled, but not at him. For once, her fury was directed entirely at their enemies. The youngest laughed wildly in battle, staff spinning, shouting over the din. Did you see him jump on that tram? By the end, the raiders fled, leaving behind smoking wreckage. The people cheered, gathering around their defenders. The sisters stood tall, blades raised. The human staggered into view, covered in soot, hair standing at odd angles, holding a half-broken drone he'd ripped from an enemy ship. He raised it high and shouted, Souvenir! The crowd roared with laughter and applause. That night, in the quiet of the hall, the sisters sat around him. For once, their ears were not quivering with anger. The eldest studied him long and hard. You are still a fool, she said finally, but perhaps the useful one. The second exhaled. You fight like chaos itself. And yet you win. The youngest leaned closer, smiling despite the weariness of battle. I think you're lucky. And I think we are lucky you are here. The human blinked, surprised. He looked at each of them, then grinned crookedly. Well, don't say it too loud. You'll ruin my reputation. The sisters laughed together, softly at first, then louder, filling the hall with a sound that had not echoed there in many years. And though none of them would admit it, the bond they swore they would never accept had begun to take root, as stubborn and unexpected as the human himself. The city was still smoldering when the second attack came, bigger and far more organized than before. This time, the rival houses came with fleets, their warships blotting out the twin suns, their voices echoing across the comm net like a chorus of predators. The council panicked, the nobles whispered of surrender, and House Veylara stood on the brink of collapse. The sisters armed themselves again, blades humming, armor gleaming, ears flicking with tension. They were ready to fight to the last breath. The human, however, sat in the corner with a datapad, frowning. "You're all thinking about this wrong," he said, tapping the display like a teacher scolding students. "They expect you to fight like warriors. So don't." The eldest snapped. "What do you propose then, human? We lay down our arms and wait to be slaughtered." He grinned. "No, we cheat." He showed them a plan so absurd that the sisters nearly threw him out of the room. He wanted to use the broken drones he'd been tinkering with, the faulty trams he'd somehow coaxed into working, and even the shattered remains of the raiders' weapons. He called it a patchwork defense system. The eldest called it insanity. The second called it humiliating. The youngest whispered, almost hopefully, "Maybe it could work." When the fleets descended, the skies above Veylara Prime lit with fire. Enemy ships launched wave after wave of raiders, but what met them wasn't the elegant precision of Veylaran armies. It was chaos. Trams flew off tracks, repurposed as battering rams. Drones stitched together, with scrap metal buzzed madly, into enemy formations, exploding in inconvenient places. Hollow projectors turned entire districts into mazes of false images, tricking raiders into chasing phantoms. And at the center of it all, the human, cackling over a comm, shouted things like, "Deploy the fruit bombs. And don't stand under that. It's going to explode in 3-2. Oh, too late." The sisters fought beside him, weaving their deadly precision into his ridiculous tactics. For the first time, they weren't embarrassed by him. They were adapting to him. The eldest used his distractions to strike vital blows. The second protected his fragile machines, cursing the entire time, but never leaving his side. The youngest followed his laughter into the thick of the fight, turning battle into something almost playful. Together, they were unstoppable. The enemy, unused to such unpredictable resistance, faltered. Ships collided in confusion. Raiders panicked. Commanders shouted contradictory orders. By the time the sun dipped behind the towers, the fleet was retreating, humiliated by what should have been the weakest house on the planet. When the dust settled, the people of Veylara Prime gathered in the plaza. The sisters stood tall, armor dented and stained, ears high with pride. Beside them stood the human, covered in soot, holding a half-melted frying pan like a trophy. The crowd roared. Nobles bowed. The arbiter declared, "House Veylara is restored to honor. Bound to the human, they are stronger than ever." That night, the four of them sat together in the hall, silent at first, exhausted from victory. Finally, the eldest spoke. "I mocked you," she admitted, voice heavy. "I called you weak. But today, I saw strength that is not ours. Strength we needed." The second sighed. "I swore I would fight you every day. Instead, I fought with you, and I did not hate it." The youngest smiled softly. "I laughed at you more than anyone. But now, I laugh with you." The human looked at them, eyes tired but warm. "When I came here, I thought I was doomed. 3 wives who hated me, a whole city laughing at me. But you didn't break me. You made me better. And maybe, just maybe, I made you better too." The eldest raised her cup. To survival. The second raised hers. To chaos. The youngest clinked hers last. To us. He lifted his battered cup, grinning. To family. The weirdest one in the galaxy. They drank, and for the first time since their punishment had begun, the sisters laughed freely, without shame. The sound echoed through the halls of House Veylara, like music, carrying into the night. And though the law had bound them in mockery, what they had forged together in battle and laughter was no punishment at all. It was choice. It was trust. It was something neither human nor Veylaran had expected to find. When dawn rose over Veylara Prime, the city was scarred but alive, its people whispering not of shame, but of pride. The sisters walked beside the human, no longer hiding, no longer resisting. Their ears caught the wind like banners of defiance. The human glanced at them and chuckled. So breakfast. The eldest groaned. The second rolled her eyes. The youngest burst into laughter. And together, they walked forward into whatever battles and absurdities the galaxy still had waiting for them. The end.